All of us are searching, knowingly or unknowingly, for enlightenment, truth, and harmony in our lives. This program, hosted by Dr. Gregory Penn, will help you aspire to a more fulfilling and rewarding life.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of Aspire Unplugged. Today we're going to look at love and forgiveness. So, how does one live from a place of love?
Selflessly, without the idea of what will I get for my love. And that is not a human trait, so it's basically impossible. And when I look at human love, it is, you see, the culprit of all of our mischief here on earth is the human heart. It is a mischief maker, and all it does is produce nothing but pain and sorrow. So that's why we like to watch these, movies where people get a broken heart and then they recover and find their great love or whatever. We love all that stuff because it reinforces the human heart. And sorrow and pain are going to be involved in anything that the human heart's involved in. And that's what women like to think of as passion. They love a man who's passionate. In other words, throwing, common sense to the wind and loving them beyond all of their stuff. So, and men do it with women, believe me, they do. I see it all the time in my session work. So there is no such thing as love on the planet. There isn't. Everybody wants to think there is, but there isn't. What we have is mutual satisfaction. And if I satisfy my lover's, her desires to be the most beautiful woman I've ever seen and the only woman, there are hundreds of women, thousands of women that could do better or be the same, it's ridiculous. Human love is the culprit for everything. And it's the human heart that is the big problem. And we never learn from our human heart anything. My human heart Greg is full of prejudice, totally full of prejudice. And what he likes and what he doesn't like, what he thinks right and wrong, and that's it. So you don't measure up to that, I don't love you. So love your enemy as yourself, did say the Jesus. That is not something the human heart can fathom. Human heart can't love your enemy. Love your enemy as yourself. Well, guess what? I mean, it's self-explanatory. My enemy is Greg. No matter what I may think, my enemy's Greg. So I have to learn, how do you love Greg? How do you have self-love? Everybody's into that. That's not true. Self-love is narcissistic. It's not totally. If I always say to people, if you could see you and meet you the way you are, based on the way you are, you wouldn't like you for a minute. You wouldn't even want to be near you. You would see all that prejudice and all of that, the selfishness and egotistical stuff that's involved. The emperor of all malice, my human heart, that's what I call it. You felt vengeance, I'm sure, in your life. I have. And where does that come from? My heart. And is the intensity of that vengeance in my human heart the same as falling in love with a woman or a friend or, someone that you care? Yeah, it's about the same thing. Don't you cross the line, because if you do, I'm not going to love you anymore.
So we got to strive to get beyond all of that, right? Is that what you're saying? We got to strive?
We are on a planet where that kind of love is prevalent. We are on a planet where the only thing that is important is reproduction. Sex and money, in that order, are the two things on this planet that are singly the most important things in this world. Sex and money. Okay? So when we see scandals or we see people having affairs or whatever, it's all about the intrigue of, ooh, I'd love to do that. Or I wish I could do that, or, oh, you're a terrible person for doing that, you know?
Okay. But you got to give us some tips here, some pointers. We got viewers out here that want to know how to love authentically, right?
No.
Come on.
No, we have a few probably here and there. Honestly, I'm being very, candid. This is my last shoot, so I can tell it like it is, and the repercussions don't matter. No. People want what they want, and they want it now. And you can't improve the human. You only have one of two choices in this world. You stay human, or you transcend into the divine. You start working on yourself. And working on yourself and understanding the delusions and the illusions of my assumptive behavior, my assumptive thinking. The worst thing a person can do is come to a conclusion about anything. You're bad, you're good, I'm wrong, you're right, you're wrong, I'm right. These conclusions defy love. Mm-hmm. So no, there isn't anything. There really, really isn't. All you need is love, did John say, right? Mm-hmm. He was right, but not the love he was talking about.
We're talking about different definitions here.
Oh, we're talking about transcendence love or human love, you know? And that human heart, it makes... Do you think that Adolf Hitler had love?
Probably the human love, right?
Yeah, and look what he did with it.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think Charles Manson did?
Sure.
Yeah. You think Trump does?
He thinks he does.
Yeah.
He thinks everybody loves him.
Yeah, that's right. So we've turned it into things to bring us power and authority and notoriety. And we want people to respect us and admire us and fear us. See, there's only 1 degree of difference between love and fear. Love and hate. Mm-hmm. You can say one wrong thing to someone that you've known for years. It's over. One wrong thing. One thing they don't like. We're very fragile people because we live by this heat suit.
Right. So what are some tools that we can try to strive for this transcendent love?
Well, it depends on who you are. If you want the transcendence love, you would have to fast from your human heart. And that means, 1, I would not get involved in my impulses. Just because I have an impulse doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Just because I have an impulse and I think it would be gratifying, I wouldn't do it. I would wait. I would watch. I would watch and see how I'm influenced by my impulses. Then I wouldn't talk to my thoughts anymore. I wouldn't have conversations with my thoughts. Mm-hmm. That would start to bring about third person. And
so you're really stepping out of your head
Yeah.
and looking at the thing from up here
Yeah.
instead of inside here.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And American public isn't going to do that. They're glued to their TV sets. They want to carry a weapon around with them all the time. I get these emails. Here's how you get a carry-on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what would I want with that? I'd only shoot myself in the foot. You know me. But the whole thing is about hate and fear. You're not going to change this world. It's a huge thing for a person to have the cold water splashed on them and say, hey, this really has been a mockery, hasn't it? I've made a mockery of and I'm in the mockery of people. And while I'm in this mockery, this collective unconscious, I'm trying to survive. Mm-hmm. And that's where people get the idea, I just want to get through. How much time do you think a person would be willing to spend working on themselves? None.
Not with all of the distractions that we have on a
That's
day-to-day
right.
basis. Everything is a distraction.
Yeah, so they go to churches and listen to movies and music that appeases their human heart. And Jesus warned, he said, there is nothing more dangerous, nothing more destructive than hardness of heart. And think how hardened you and I, as human beings, have become at this age. We've seen a lot of things we didn't like. Wars, people dying, people shooting up kids in school. And what do you think that does? I start to get cynical. I don't do that. Greg can do that. Greg, I don't know what Greg's doing there. I don't pay much attention. I used to say when I was teaching formally, if you were as conscious and as diligent about your practice as you are about your mischief, you'd be awakened by now. And they all went, oh, that's so fun. Yeah, but they had no idea what I was really saying. People are not too bright.
Well, let's talk about forgiveness.
Oh, my favorite subject.
How does it come into play in trying to get out of your head and back here and seeing the world as it is?
I have to see that whatever you did, you didn't do. I did it by inviting you into my life. Let's say you did something I didn't like. I'd have to ask myself, well, first of all, who is he? Who does he think he is? He doesn't know. He didn't know. He didn't know what he was doing. Even if he did, let's say you said something vengeful, something ugly. That wasn't true. Then I'd have to look at it and go, well, that's the way he sees me. And that's okay. I can't change that. You've never been able to. Someone that dislikes you, you'll never be able to change it. Ever. Ever. Never. They'll always hold that little bit back, that prejudice, and hold that deep in their little human heart, I accept it, but I don't trust you. That kind of thing. So I would have to really let go of what Greg thinks you did and forgive Greg for thinking and assuming that's what you did.
Well, take it a step further. Somebody's done something terrible to you or somebody
I've
else.
had people do terrible
what if
things.
it was like you mentioned Hitler?
Yeah.
Can you forgive a Hitler?
I don't like what he did, but he spurred on something that's going on in our world today, and that is racism. And using people to get what he wanted. I see no difference between him and what's going on in the world today, all around the world. So it would be, I think, a more apropos thing would be, did someone try to be cruel to me for the sake of their own gratification, to prove themselves to be right, that kind of thing. So I look at people. You have the right to think whatever you want. People are going to be watching the program and think, Greg's crazy, still nuttier than a fruitcake or whatever, and they'd be right, according to their viewpoint. Does it affect me?
No, because you're you.
I'm me, and I love what Jesus said. Father, forgive them; they know not what they do. We don't know what we're doing. We did a series, We Know Not What We Do.
That's right.
Yeah.
Check it out, YouTube.
Yeah.
So you can't just ignore the idiots and the wrongdoers and decide not to forgive them.
I always say to my enemies, forgive me. Even when you would think that you would realize they misjudged. So I always take the low road, which is really the high road. It just
It's not
turns.
really any skin off your back, is it? Anyway, to forgive somebody.
Well, there's something more at stake, and it's mercy.
Yeah.
You see, the most important thing in life is to become merciful. And if I'm not merciful, then I will never go beyond my human heart. And I'll never, even to the people that I think I love, I will never be able to love you as deeply as I could, transcending Greg. Greg is to be left behind. He can't change. The mercy is what did Jesus say? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. They will be forgiven. And I have a lot to be forgiven for. Everybody does. If you've got a human body, you've got mischief. Lots of it. And we all need to be forgiven for how we've used it.
Okay, let's talk about forgiving yourself for a second. Here's a question from a student.
Okay.
And I got a clip here. It's I can't undo what I've done or do away with my genetics. So how is restitution possible? Isn't that closing the barn door after the cow left? So let's look at this this clip from the Beatitudes.
So what can I say to you? When you start to look at the way of our world, the way of life, the way we live our life, we have a lot to be remorseful about. But will I now make restitution, instead of feeling guilty and ashamed of what I've done, to change the way I live? And that's where the forgiveness comes in. Authentic forgiveness has nothing to do with being a decree. I don't decree, I forgive you. When people say to me, I forgive you, you get that feeling. We all get that feeling. You didn't. You're saying that. You'd like to forgive me, but you can't. And then people have their little sayings. Forgiveness is, forgetting and all that stuff. It's not. It's none of that. It is me no longer living from my genetics, from the background of what I think of that comes from my forefathers, my genetic heart of what's right and wrong, what's moral, what's immoral. Did somebody do you wrong? Well, guess what? You and I are as much a part of that when someone does us wrong as the person who did the wrong. And we don't really want to see that. That's not something we want to believe in, because victim is so very important in our culture and our society. Because when you're a victim, you don't have to take responsibility for that part of yourself and myself that engaged in the activity in the first place. Boy, was that right on the money.
You were in the zone that day too.
It was really, yeah. It's interesting. There are no victims in anything. I have to forgive myself, and that whole idea of I have to forgive myself is ridiculous. Because Greg can't be forgiven. He'll do it again and again and again, and he'll have all sorts of alibis as to why he's doing that. No. I have to transcend. What is it about me that made this possible? That's the question. And why am I subservient to Greg? Why do I let Greg call all the shots? Why? That's the question. And can I see over the hill? Can I see the bigger picture of how Greg affects other people? What I do to you, do to her, do to him, it's all passed on one way or the other. We live in such a mundane life, the way we have chosen to live in the carcass. The meat suit, as you and I call it. Yeah. And it just reduces my life down to
base desires.
Yeah, base desires is a very good way of looking at it.
All right. Well, I got some base desires I need to attend to.
Oh,
right
do you?
now. Yes. So,
Okay.
So we'll wrap this one up, and stay tuned for another episode coming up right away. Thank you.